today marks International Women's Day with the theme, the UN Women's Organization, urging women to come together under this theme, Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. The group is also calling for climate action for women by women. The organization says women and girls experience the greatest impact of the climate crisis as it amplifies existing gender inequalities and puts women's lives and livelihoods at risk. Let's speak to the policy advisor for women's economic empowerment at UN Women. That's Mehjabeen Alarakhia, who joins us now via our video link. Mehjabeen, it's great to talk to you this morning, and can we say a happy International Women's Day to you as well this morning. For those of us who are trying to connect the dots insofar as the climate crisis is concerned and why it impacts women, like many crises around the world, why it impacts women and girls more. Can you break that down for us?
So the climate crisis does impact women more, and particularly if you look at the situation in Africa, we see that the women, agriculture employs about 90% of women, and the climate crisis also affects our agriculture productivity, our land, it affects the weather patterns. So in this case, there is a direct link between women's livelihoods, between food security for households, and this is where the link comes in. But in addition to that, women are also often in rural parts of Africa, for example, responsible for fetching water for the household and other such like firewood and cooking fuel and these kind of things for the household. With the climate change that's happening, water sources become more scarce, we have floods, we have different sort of climatic events happening, which tend to affect women's ability to provide for their households and those very basic needs. With the scarcity of water, for example, you might have women who have to walk further to go and fetch water, which means that they have less time available for other things, but it's also more physically taxing. The increased distance that they have to go could also subject them to violence along the way, attackers and other things. So there's multiple sort of aspects to it that do affect women's lives generally in terms of the change in climate. The other aspect of it is that the reduced resources, both land and agriculture and others, also can affect the dynamics in the household, and therefore putting more strain on households and could increase the risk of women's domestic violence that usually women are the victims of.
Yeah, far-reaching consequences, not only linked to the climate crisis, but far-reaching consequences into the lives of these women. You talk about their lives and their livelihoods, many of them responsible for providing for their family, involved in farming, as you say, collecting water and so on. It affects, therefore, also the lives of those who depend on these women, their children and their families.
Yes.
Mehjabeen, are you still with us?
Yes, I didn't hear the question.
The impact of the climate crisis, as you've outlined for us, affecting women disproportionately, and also their children and their dependents, their families.
Yes, absolutely. So it affects the future generations as well, because it's not only looking at how women within the household, but then their children, their husbands. It also has further ripple effects in terms of the children being able to go to school, their partners or themselves being able to go to work, because again, it has the women's role generally in our societies is to provide the care services in the home. And if women are unable to provide that care service because of the climate crisis, it also has implications on the ability of the other family members to do the other work that they are part of doing in the economy. So this, there are multiple angles and aspects of how climate change that we tend to think is just about the weather, but has real implications on women's lives and the lives of, Africans in rural areas.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting that the theme for this year's International Women's Day is around sustainability, around climate change and women, because last year the Action Coalition for Feminist Action for Climate Justice was also launched. That was meant to bring together government, NGOs, private sector companies as well. Do we know the kind of progress that has been made as we mark International Women's Day today?
So the progress is really around the momentum in building the awareness. At this point, we also just had, and it's ongoing, but there is the Commission for Status of Women, which is an annual meeting of all the governments at the UN in New York, usually in the second half of March, where we also have a statement, a commitment made by all member states of the UN. The theme aligns very much to the same International Women's Day theme this year and builds on the work from the action coalitions as well. We just completed the African Union, consultation and have a joint African position around this. And these issues around women and the impacts of climate change on women and women's livelihoods and women's lives overall was also very strongly featured. The action coalitions are intended to bring together the momentum and to bring together the partners from all the different aspects of our world and really get everyone aligned behind the issues that are pertinent in the day. And the climate crisis is actually an existential crisis for mankind, really, for humanity. So we need to really have everyone as part of the change, because if we don't all do something about it, it won't be enough. Yeah. On the positive side, we still have time. Like, it's not too late. We can still do this, but we all have to come together to play our part.
Would you say that particularly countries on the continent, that they're seeing this link between the climate crisis, the livelihoods of women, and the increase in the vulnerability of women to things like domestic violence, the threat to education, etc.?
So in terms of the statistics, Africa produces about 4% annually of the global sort of carbon dioxide production. So the carbon footprint of Africa overall is very, very small. But when you look at the 50, there's a ranking that looks at the countries that are most vulnerable. Of the 50 most vulnerable countries, more than 70% of those are in Africa. So we're feeling it very much in Africa, but we are definitely not contributing so much to it. However, because we're feeling it, we are at the brunt of it, and we need to take action towards it. And in some cases, it is about reducing the carbon footprint, but in some cases, it's really about investing in the infrastructure that's going to support and mitigate the climate change. It's investing in the behaviors that are going to mitigate climate change. And it's also engaging women in the conversation, because women know how to deal with a lot of these issues. Women have that indigenous traditional knowledge that we are not capitalizing on. And in Africa, we know that this information exists, and there is very much a recognition from the countries, the governments, and the people that we have this knowledge that we need to capitalize on, to learn from, and then look at how we can scale it up.
Certainly. Mehjabeen Alarakhia, thank you so much for your time this morning on the AM Report to mark International Women's Day today. UN Women calling all women to come together under the theme for this year, which is Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow.